Well, good morning and hello and welcome to this Greater Birmingham Chambers of Commerce Q&A. I'm Deb Leary, President of the Chamber, and I'm joined by Philip Bindley, Managing Director, Cloud and Security at Intercity Technologies Limited. Welcome, Philip.
Good morning.
Good morning. It's a bright and sunny morning today in Birmingham and the wider region, so
yes,
it's good that the sun is shining on us, so great to see you. So everyone, this Q&A is part of the Chamber's Future in Technology campaign, and Future in Technology aims to support local businesses in maximising the opportunities related to technological development and digital access. And the purpose of this Q&A is to provide firms in the Greater Birmingham region information on how they can protect their computer systems and networks from information disclosure, theft of, or damage to their hardware, software, or electronic data, as well as from the disruption or misdirection of the services they provide. Now, it's a really important area we're talking about now. It's business critical, and anybody who doesn't believe that is very, very vulnerable indeed. So, Philip, we've got some questions I'd like to put to you, but I really want a discussion as well. I think there's a lot to talk about because we're looking at the infrastructure element, we can be talking about the human element, it all comes into play. So I suppose the big question is, how significant is the risk of a cybersecurity breach to a local business, particularly an SME?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of these things that everyone's probably aware of, but are you taking the right steps to protect yourself? Because everyone's at risk, whether that's because you're targeted, but more than likely you're just collateral damage of somebody that's just trying to find somebody that's got their defenses down. It's not necessarily that, especially in SME space, that you're likely to be, a direct target, that somebody's actually going directly for your business. But the cyber criminals, the threat actors, they're out there and they're looking and they're trying to find those individuals, those businesses that haven't necessarily done the right things, the people that haven't got in place the defenses that they need. And it's the old adage of, why do you lock your door when you leave home in the morning? It's not because it stops somebody breaking into your house. It just makes them less likely to break into your house and go next door who have left their door open.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, there's an assumption that threat actors in this space, that it's money driven, and it's not necessarily so. It's also kudos, being able to get into those systems and cause damage. So it's actually reputation for them as well.
It is completely.
Yeah, so that's another element to it. And I think you're quite right that it's not that they're specifically going to target an SME, they're just looking for that gap.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that gap can come in many forms, can't it? I mean, if you don't update systems, for example.
Yeah, I mean, we find, and it's borne out in statistics that most breaches occur because of something very simple, not something very complicated. Unpatched operating systems, not updated antivirus systems, phishing emails that manage to get through the email filter systems, and then somebody clicks on the link because they think it's the offer of a lifetime, for example. But it's those little things. It's not about going out and spending hundreds of thousands of pounds on cybersecurity defenses. It's about basic hygiene most of the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a really good point, what you brought out there about, spending hundreds of thousands of pounds on sort of infrastructure necessarily and security, because you've got, from an SME point of view, you've got to do what's reasonable. And I think sometimes, perhaps companies get a bit scared about the language of cyber and, oh my gosh, we've got to spend all this money, and it doesn't have to be so complicated. I think, having those right discussions with good companies like yourselves, to understand what's required for them particularly, I think is really important. It's not one size fits all.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think there's a bit of a dinner party joke that I tell. And, it's about two guys out in Africa filming a wildlife documentary, and they start to get chased by a lion. And as they're running away, the one guy stops and gets his Nike Air trainers out of his bag and puts them on. And the guy says, "What are you doing that for? You can't outrun a lion." And he says, "I don't need to. I only need to outrun you." And that's really what it's about. It's about that basic hygiene, making the kind of difficulty factor enough so that they move on to the next one and the next one and the next one. Just make it too difficult, because ultimately, as you say, whether it's for kudos or whether it's for financial gain, ultimately there's a point at which the threat actors will just say, this is not worthwhile for me to invest my time and resources and ultimately potentially money in trying to breach this organization, because I can find another 10 that are much easier to do. So it's about, and you know, that balance between the investment that you make and the levels of data and the risk of that data being exfiltrated, the damage that could do to your organization. Just getting that right is probably the most difficult thing for SMEs, because they aren't cybersecurity experts in general. They do understand the basic tenets of cybersecurity, but they're not experts in it, and therefore they need to understand that what they need to do is not some kind of super rocket science that's designed to protect the Department of Defense in the United States. This is about my business. What are my risks? Understanding my risks, because ultimately, private entrepreneurial business is all about taking risks, but it's about managing those risks and understanding those risks and acting appropriately ultimately.
In forensics, certainly one of the key things that said in forensics, you can only do what's reasonable. And that's basically what we've got to get that message across. Keep it simple, but keep it effective. And I think those are the key things. Coming back to where we are now in the new hybrid work that we're now in, hybrid scenario, have you seen businesses being more cautious? And do they need to be more conscious of their cybersecurity because of that hybrid?
Yeah, I think there's been a shift, and I think that shift was coming anyway. And certainly in technology businesses, we've been working in a hybrid way for 20 odd years. We just have. I've been working at home off and on for, the good part of 2 decades. But I think a lot of businesses, especially bricks and mortar businesses, for example, are very much about, I've got my office, I've got my corporate network, I've got my corporate perimeter, I protect everything that's inside that sort of security bubble. But that bubble's now burst because people are anywhere, potentially on anything, accessing multiple cloud environments. Whether you know it or not as a business, you're probably a multi-cloud user. Well, you ask yourself, what's a multi-cloud user mean? Well, it means that you probably use some sort of HR online system. You probably use an online CRM of some description. You're almost definitely a Microsoft 365 for your email and office kind of applications. So your data is everywhere. So how are you protecting that? Your users are anywhere on potentially anything. So how are you protecting that? And I think the shift has become from protecting an environment to protecting people. And I think that's the mindset, the mind shift that needs to happen. How do I protect my people?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is coming back to my point earlier about that human element. So it's everything. It's not just the infrastructure. The infrastructure is key, but the other key element is the human aspect. And in some of the work that we do, it's very much focused on that human behaviour and being able to address that and support that. So from your point of view, how can local businesses take steps to protect themselves and minimise the vulnerabilities?
Well, I think the most important thing to do, if you said you can do one thing and one thing only, security awareness in your workforce, absolutely paramount. Making sure that you reduce the risk of somebody doing something inadvertently, not necessarily maliciously, that can cause damage to your organization. And I've been preaching the sermon from the Mount for many years on this. Security awareness is not that dusty old PowerPoint that once a year we get out, we get everyone to sit in the office, they maybe don't listen for an hour, then sign their name, and it's a tick box exercise. That doesn't work. It has to be continuous. It has to be all the time. And you need to be able to measure it. You need to be able to prove to yourself that you are getting better. And if you think about where breaches come from, in lots of SME space, it's going to be a phishing attack. It will be a phishing attack that causes that data exfiltration eventually. So how do you stop it at sort of at root? So how do I get my colleagues, my supply chain? How do I make sure that they're doing the right things around ensuring that people aren't the weak link? You know, that human firewall, as we talk about. That's the one thing that I would definitely focus on. I think secondly to that, it's then about the endpoints, mobile devices, laptops, desktops, making sure that they're well protected, because they are almost definitely the entry point into your organization. And thirdly, I think one thing that businesses really do need to get better at is their supply chain. The number of breaches that we see that come from a third party, for example, the big British Airways incident, that was a chatbot that was screen scraping people's credit cards because the people who provided the chatbot software hadn't done the right things at their end. So understanding the risks in your supply chain, I think, are critical.
Yeah, I mean, those are really good points. And supply chain's a major issue, and it is a challenge to businesses to keep on top of that. And certainly, you know, that point about cyber training, if you like, and awareness of security in that area is not just for Christmas. It's not just a one hit. And I know when I talk to our clients, you know, sometimes they come to us and they say, well, I'll do it this year once. And we go, no. This is something this is an investment that you have to keep doing all the time, because you've got to keep on top of it for the security of your business and for your people as well. And I see it very much as a case of investing in people, because if you're, as a company, if you're investing in the people from a business point of view and securing your systems and the way they work, you're also investing in them because it gives them awareness in their own personal lives as well.
Absolutely. You know,
so it's well worthwhile doing. I mean, do you think, and I know what I feel on this, can businesses ever be entirely safe from cyber attacks?
No, there is no such thing as 100% secure. If a state-sponsored actor or a really well-funded cybercrime organization decided to go after anything, and I mean anything, they will breach it. I've worked with ethical hackers who have come from the other side of the fence, some of them, and they will get in. Given enough time and enough money, they'll get in. But ultimately, I think for SMEs especially, what's the risk of that, of a state-sponsored actor or a big cybercrime organization going after you? Probably zero, or as near to zero as matters. But I think one of the things that I'd like to see, I wrote an article 11 years ago in Information Security magazine saying cybersecurity, information security is a boardroom issue. It's not an IT issue, it's a boardroom issue. It's about business, it's not about technology. Technology can support it, technology can help you put the defenses in place, but ultimately it's a business thing. It's not an IT thing, in quotation marks. And in that, businesses need to change their mindset. They need to think about why information security is important and take it away from, I want to stop bad things happening to me, and think about it in a more positive frame. If I get this right, I can be more competitive. If I get this right, I manage risks. If I get this right, I protect my brand. If I get this right, it allows me to be innovative, but in a controlled way. So when you put it into that sort of business language around why actually being secure is not just stopping the bad guys from doing something bad, but it actually makes your business better, I think we'll start to see a change in how it's approached.
Phil, I couldn't agree with you more. It's something that I've been going on about for quite a while now. I think this is not to do with IT. The IT is the tool. It isn't the reason.
Yeah.
It's about that business element. This is about protecting brand, which is, you know, companies have spent so much money and time and energy in building those relationships, that energy, that brand and the reputation.
The trust.
And the trust. And that's where this sits. I totally agree with you. This is a boardroom issue. This is not an IT issue. The IT is the tool and it's an important one, but the protecting brand and reputation is fundamentally the key thing that we need to be focused on. And it's a really, it's a critical point, because otherwise it won't move forward in the business if it sticks within the tech. I think that's if anybody's listening to this at all, take that one thing, because that is so important. This is about your brand and this is about your reputation. So that's really key. One of the other things I wanted to ask about, what is, so in terms of cybersecurity risks, if we can just narrow it down now, and perhaps you give 3 key points about what are the most common cybersecurity vulnerabilities, and what and your recommendations, and we can end on that point.
Yeah, I think, again, I'm going to go over well-trodden ground on this one, because it's nothing revolutionary. It's not reinventing the wheel in any way, shape or form. Number one, people. Focus on your people. Make sure that they have the right level of awareness around what the risks are that are out there. And there's lots of ways to do that. There are lots of online platforms that allow you to be able to fish your employee base safely. And then you can see who opens the links, who clicks on things, and you can give them some extra training, loads of content available, and not people sitting down for hours and hours going through training course after training course. Little bite-sized chunks of information, but frequency is the critical part of that. Always telling them about what's going on in the world, how the bad guys are trying to get to them. Make them less easily socially engineered.
Yes.
That to me will be number one forever. It will not change. I think number two is again, it's basic hygiene, making sure that you have in place the rigor around patching operating systems, making sure that your antivirus systems and anti-malware systems are up to date, making sure that there are no vulnerabilities that are there because you haven't done something that you could very easily do. They're my kind of top two. And I think thirdly, and it kind of encompasses that, make sure that you don't do the things that the cyber criminals expect you to do. And again, that sort of comes back to social engineering to a degree, but it's about your behavior. They prey on the fact that people behave in a certain way. And in physical security world, for example, why do we let people tailgate us through doors that people are supposed to use a pass on? Because we're polite as human beings. We see somebody carrying a bag and we think, oh, we'll open the door for them.
Yeah.
And that's in the physical world, but it plays out in the digital world as well. There are expected behaviors. And if you can manage to turn that around so that you can politely refuse those various steps that the cyber criminals are expecting you to take, you will protect your business much more fully than you are today.
Absolutely. Those are all really good tips, and yeah, I get what you say about it's not rocket science, it's not new, but these things have to keep being reinforced, because we get into our day-to-day and we forget these things, and life goes on and we're all safe and secure, we think. So I think reinforcing those points is really important.
Yeah, I think just visibility. Make sure that you have the visibility of the things that you need to know. Can I quickly, as a snapshot, as a member of a board of a business, or the CEO or the CFO, whoever it may be, how do I? Because my time is poor. I know that I'm completely maxed out all the time. So how can I get from my IT security function, my cyber security function, whoever that may be, my third-party outsourced provider, that visibility that says everything's okay, all the things that should have been done have been done, so that you can assure yourself as a business leader that the appropriate steps have been taken and are being taken at all times. Yeah,
no, totally. And it's from our perspective as well, it's very much around companies understanding where their data is, and who's got access to that data, and what's out there, whether it's social media or open web, dark web, all of those things. It's almost an insurance policy that, when you come down to monitoring and looking at where your vulnerabilities are and where your data is.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite interesting that you say insurance policy, because one of the things that I always sort of battled with is when cyber insurance first came out, lots of businesses obviously made that investment because they thought, well, if I have a breach, it's going to cost a lot of money. I need to have an insurance policy in place. But the cyber insurers themselves, it was almost like, how much cover do you want was the question. Whereas if you go for a car insurance policy, what car do you drive, how old are you, have you got any points on your license, where's it parked overnight, what postcode do you live in. There are loads of qualifying questions. But with cybersecurity, not so much so in its sort of infancy, but it's maturing as a product. And we're seeing more and more, and it's kind of a takeaway for anyone that's listening in that's got a cyber insurance renewal coming up. You're going to be tested by your cyber insurers. They're going to ask you questions about what you're doing to protect yourself. So just put it on the radar. They're going to be wanting to know how you protect your laptops, what you do about security awareness training, X, Y, Z. They're going to ask these questions.
And I want evidence of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's not going to be a tick box, because this is big money we can be talking about. They're going to want to see that evidence. And so it's not going to be a case of, yes, I've done this and that's it. You've got to be able to demonstrate that you've done it.
Correct.
Yeah, so I totally agree with that. And I think the cyber insurance market has matured. I still think it's got a little way to go. But, you know, these things evolve, but they need to evolve quickly, because we've got to keep on top of everything.
That's right. Yeah.
Well, listen, Phil, it's been an absolute delight to talk to you. I know me and you could talk forever, actually, and on various angles on this. So, but I'd like to say thank you very much for your time today. The discussions, you know, covered a lot of ground, but it's brought out some really key points. So thank you very much. And for me as Chamber President, I'm really pleased that as a Chamber we're covering this. It's business critical, it's boardroom critical, and we're really delighted to have had Phil on the call. So thank you.
Been a pleasure. Thank you.
Bye.